there's a lot of training, there's a lot of different platforms. Teams has been immensely useful. But what would you say are some of the best practices around how much screen time you want your staff to be actually doing? I know this is kind of the new reality, but we've also been hearing, and maybe this goes kind of beyond IT, but what is kind of a healthy dose of sort of screen time you should be pushing on to your employees at the same time?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. To me, it depends on the job. When you talk about screen time, there's just jobs where you're in front of the screen all day. You could be an accounting clerk or a programmer or something like that. So that requires you to be in front of the screen pretty well all day. So,
yeah, maybe screen time wasn't the correct, but sort of you're hearing a lot about Zoom fatigue and all these fatigues because you're just going from one meeting to another. So I'm just wondering if you've had any useful tips about strategically in terms of what other organizations are doing out there, so they're not just going from one virtual meeting to the next, or maybe this is just the new normal that we're all now facing.
I'll tell you what my last 2 days have been like. That's exactly what it's been. It's been from one meeting to another. So during the first 8 weeks maybe of the pandemic, it was actually quite quiet. It was just more about emergency type of video conferences and things like that. But as we return to normal, now those times you were in a meeting room for back-to-back meetings, now I'm finding I'm on video conferencing platforms pretty well most of the day now. So it's like with any meetings, it's always, if you have the ability to pace it out a bit, add some gaps, that's always good, because I know I find actually the video conferencing meetings much more tiring. And I don't know if that's just because my eyes are getting old or what it is, but
exactly.
There's something to be said for the different types of meetings. So if you're trying to have meetings where you're trying to have strategic discussions or planning and things like that, I find those quite difficult to have over a video conference because usually when you're doing those types of meetings, everybody wants to contribute all at once. And it's hard to sometimes control that during a video conference. And sometimes you want to be able to see someone's body language or how they're reacting to your answer or your questions or whatever. So there's always those types of things. I find project type meetings where maybe you have an initiative that you're working on and you're trying to develop a new process or whatever it is and apply some technology, is something that's very, very project oriented. I find those work very, very well using a video conference. So it just all depends, right?
Yeah, I mean, Tony just said that he does more than 10 or more conference calls each week, and that's sort of the average for him. But yeah, some days it's, for us, we have 5-6 hours worth of virtual calls in some fashion.
That's it in a week? Wow, that's pretty good.
No, in a day we'll have.
In a day, okay, in a day, yeah, now that's a lot.
Yeah. Anyway, I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah. All right. So that's been quite an interesting topic. If we can, I wouldn't mind switching over to more the technology side of things. So more about access to systems and maybe some of the challenges people had with that. I know I've had numerous conversations with our partners around that, and dealing with home internet issues seems to be quite a big one, because it seems like all of a sudden during the day there used to be nobody at home, and now there's mom and dad and kids all at home, and people are trying to do their work from home, and the kids are firing up Netflix or playing games or whatever it is. So it's kind of like it's definitely been challenging for some people. So yeah, I don't know if anybody else has had those challenges, but I know I've definitely I haven't experienced it myself, but I know of others who have experienced that.
Yeah, actually, just that's a very good note on the, especially when use at home with all these other streaming things happening. Internet has been more flaky just overall across the
Oh,
world,
yeah.
I think, in this regard. And I know one maybe useful thing too is also just to potentially look at or letting people know maybe to upgrade their own service at home if they are having issues,
Yeah,
or get a better package because they will be using more. Um,
yeah.
it's always an option, and even like maybe a per diem per staff for that, or it's
Yeah, there's all kinds of ways you can deal with that, right? I know I don't know if Dean's still on the line or not, but I know in your various operations you might be hearing things from tenants, and I know BCMPHA has a program. Justin, I don't know if you noticed it. Did they address internet bandwidth in the TELUS program, or?
Yeah, that's a good point, Mike. I'm glad you're bringing it up. So if any of our members are on the TELUS Telecom program and they are experiencing, to Mike's point, any challenges with their bandwidth, reach out to us, and what we can do is then send that information. We need specifically the buildings that have challenges, and then we can forward those details to TELUS, and then they'll work with us to try to increase the bandwidth.
Justin, do we have more questions on the chat?
Yeah, so someone was actually asking about speak more about site servers versus cloud-based servers, which is a very popular topic always. So
yeah, I had a whole whack of questions just on that alone. And I would say this is probably 80% of my work with our nonprofit partners right now, is trying to assess where they are from a technology perspective and where they need to go. A lot of the traditional technologies to have a bunch of server boxes on your premise somewhere, whether it's in a server room or a closet or whatever it is, and then usually the majority of the access is internally within the office or within your group of offices. Now that people are working more from home, they actually need access to those types of services. So a lot of organizations have been challenged by that. Almost to the point where they're sort of putting a lot more risk in their infrastructure from a security perspective by, punching more holes through the firewall and things like that, which is never ever a good idea, because the hackers are always waiting to attack one way or another. So I would say all my recommendations recently are to get yourself into the cloud as quickly as possible. Now, obviously, there is a cost to all of that. So those are things that I have a lot of discussions with organizations about. But the easy one is always get into Office 365 or Microsoft 365, because getting rid of email servers and things like that, you don't have to manage them anymore. And Microsoft has, I think, very affordable nonprofit pricing on all their products. So definitely something, if you're not thinking of doing that, you probably should, because then that gets everything cloud-based, and you can access that information from anywhere in the world in a very, very secure way. We've been working with a couple of societies around developing some training materials about how to move yourself to Office 365. So we're still developing those materials, and they should be available in the next little while. So, but there could be a lot of complexities to doing that type of a movement. So I'm always open to having a discussion with you on how to actually go about that in a very, very safe way. So, but that's always my number one recommendation: get into Office 365 as quickly as possible. Get your email in there, get your files in there. Troy, who was on the line earlier from Greater Victoria Housing, last year, it was last year or the year before, I can't remember what it was. everything runs into each other. But you know, they did a complete move to Office 365, and I think that's been quite successful for them. So I really recommend looking at that in the very near future if you're not already planning it out. You know, if you're using some type of what we call a CRM system or a client relationship management system, there's a lot of options in the cloud for you to do that. Some people are running systems like Dynamics, but running it on servers in their premise. Well, there is a cloud version of that runs in Microsoft Cloud, and I really strongly recommend considering things like that, because you're already used to using Dynamics, and all you're doing is sort of transitioning it from your on-premise over to a cloud type of a configuration. So again, like I mentioned before, I'm open to having any discussions you guys would like to about various pieces of software that could possibly run in the cloud for you.
Not seeing too many other questions come in on that, so I don't know if you want to jump to the next topic here.
Great. So actually, there was another topic in here that I wanted to talk about before we move on, and that had to do with a lot of around trying to develop more automated processes. So a lot of organizations, I had at least 3 or 4 questions around moving from paper to more electronic or digitalized processes. So you know, because that's one thing you learn through this type of a situation, is that it's very difficult to take your paper with you and fill in paper and deliver it to somebody. So so I'm definitely seeing a lot of work being done in the sector around trying to do some automation around processes, whether it's online forms or things like that. And you know, Microsoft is really good around technologies to help out with this. But there's all kinds of other, like Adobe does a lot of this, and so it just all depends on what your favorite tool might be. But there's a lot of opportunities, I think, out there to actually reduce or eliminate paper. And it could be not just a form; it could be putting in a type of a software system. Like I think there's still a lot of people who are using you know, manual-based property management systems. So there are solutions out there that can help you out with that too.
And there's one other link, Parveen, thanks for the link you just sent out for the guidance documents just on cloud. So if you was to check that out, it's always a good read. Yeah, and again, there's lots of documentation on just more information about clouds out there. So yeah.
Yeah, great. All right, any more questions or, oh, Troy's made a comment here. Sorry, did you get that comment from Troy?
Yeah, just on the electric signatures. Yeah, so Adobe again has like it's Adobe Sign, or I forget exactly the software, but there's tons of them out there. And I do know just for Adobe, we've used it for a little bit before, is they have like Creative Cloud Suite, which includes a bunch of other pieces. I don't know if the DocuSign's included, but it is an idea for, I think it's on TechSoup maybe as well, some of the Adobe offerings. So
yeah, and TechSoup has a lot of different offerings on it. So the only caution is about the Microsoft Cloud products. You actually have to go to a different place to get the nonprofit pricing for Microsoft. So and Dana's saying, yeah, TechSoup does have a DocuSign discount, so that's really good to hear. Great. Well, I thought that was a really good discussion around a variety of topics. So maybe we can move on and maybe go into our next poll question around teleconferencing software or collaboration software. So which of the following teleworking tools does your organization currently use?
if you don't see your option up there, you can just type it in chat as well if you're not seeing anything you use. Can also be a combination. So if you are using GoToMeeting and Zoom, I'd just check both of those. Like we can probably close the poll here. We've got a lot of votes in.
Okay. Interesting results. Yeah, as I expected, Zoom is a very popular product. Pretty happy to see a lot of organizations using Microsoft Teams, so so that's quite encouraging. And the GoToMeeting, yeah, I'm seeing more and more. These seem to be like the leaders that I've seen. There's some other ones out there, but these are the three main products out there. And WebEx, yeah, WebEx is sort of dying off a bit. I don't think they position themselves very well during this pandemic. So, and I think they're playing a bit of catch up when it comes to functionality and being easy to use. And yeah, then there's always the old telephone, right? Teleconferencing. I don't know. You don't have to answer this, but I know from our perspective, you know, we tried to use our teleconferencing services at the beginning, and I couldn't, you know, I guess it's not hard to believe, but there was just a ton of busy signals. Sometimes it was hard to get through. Sometimes we'd be dropped out of a teleconference. So, so hopefully those of you who were using teleconferencing didn't experience that too much.
Yeah, funny enough, Mike, we actually had the exact same thing with BCPHA. We had our staff meetings on those, so it was just everyone meet at 9 a.m. and people will be finally getting in around 9:05, 9:10 after constantly get dialing. So it's that was definitely a really good push towards using other software, so that helped.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Great. Well, thanks for your input into the poll, everybody. So last thing we wanted to talk about is maybe if there's some opportunities for all of us to work together. And so there could be some opportunity to maybe look at some software implementations, or you know, maybe some bulk procurements or whatever it might be. Like I said, BC Housing has, you know, we've had our program in place for about a year now, and it's been, I think, hugely popular. But I wouldn't mind hearing from you guys, maybe whether there are some other opportunities to work together and collaborate on things. BCMPHA has a lot of capabilities too. So, and we've worked a lot with BCMPHA in the past. So, so I just want to throw it out there to see if there are any suggestions out there. I'm wondering if maybe maybe if we can put up the before we start that, maybe put up the next slide around the BC Housing Services, just so I can educate everybody on what we've been doing. And then maybe because a lot of you probably aren't aware of some of the things that we've been doing, but this is what we call our Housing Providers Technology Support Program. So Vanessa Harder, who's also on the line, leads this program. But we've been doing just a ton of consulting over the last prior to this program being launched. I've been working with some of you for even 5-6 years already on various things. So, you know, but we offer a bunch of services around, you know, strategic planning, assessing your technology environments, how you want to transform those environments, looking at any technology issues you might be having. We've gotten into rooms with third-party IT service providers many times because there's been a real dissatisfaction with services that are being provided. So we've done that. People have had cybersecurity events, and we don't come in and run the solving of the cybersecurity issues, but we do provide a lot of advice on how to move forward with trying to deal with those types of things. We also look at your cybersecurity posture to see, make some recommendations on how you could be a more secure organization. We've been, you know, talking with a lot of organizations around business continuity. That's become quite a more important topic based on what's been happening over the last few months. You know, how do you now continue your business when you can't be on site or being able to operate as normal. So we are starting to do some business continuity planning. We're doing a lot on education. Last year, we traveled throughout the province, did cybersecurity awareness training. Maybe quite a few of you on the line were able to sit through that training, but that was hugely successful. Had a ton of societies attend that. Like I mentioned before, we've been helping out with Office 365 implementations, coming up with some step-by-step instructions on how to do that. We're working on our training now for just training. If you want to be more productive in Microsoft Outlook or using Microsoft Teams or things like that. So we're starting to develop that type of training. Even just basic IT management. We're starting to develop a training program around that because a lot of your organizations don't have dedicated IT people, but you may want to understand what some of the basic IT management principles are. So we're going to be providing some training around that. We have a lot of hardware donations that we do throughout the year. BC Housing has a lot of surplus equipment that rather going to the junk pile, it gets refurbed, and it's a perfectly good PC. Usually they're around 4-year-old PCs, which are just great for just basic Microsoft Office, and as long as you're not doing any heavy lifting with it, they're perfectly adequate PCs. So if there's any interest in that, we'd be great to hear from you. And I just put the cost of all these services just so you can factor that into your budget. We also have our housing provider technology support website. And so we post a lot of articles and resources, some training materials. We have discussion forums on there, or if you just want to put in requests for equipment or have a question or a suggestion. So we have all that capability there, or you can just contact us directly. You can contact myself or Vanessa directly if you want to get more information about this program. And then we were just in the process of starting what I call the Technology Leaders Circle. So we had sent a poll out to a number of societies late last year to start a leader circle where we would have things like these types of roundtables, and we would get together on a regular basis and discuss, maybe some opportunities, share experiences, things like that. So we're going to start kicking that off again. Confirming the interest list. So if any of you are interested in joining that, more than happy to have you there. So, but anyways, I just want to give you a flavor before we look at some other opportunities of what we currently have to offer. And like I said, feel free to contact us at any time. So, so maybe we can just open up the floor and see if anybody has any questions, comments, wants to identify some opportunities or whatever you'd like to talk about.
And just one thing to note on all this whole thing, everything is kind of going virtual nowadays. Everything's moving to more automated processes because it kind of has to be, which is one kind of good side from this. Both security again should always be hopefully considered for a lot of these pieces. So just a lot of quick decisions. That's the one concern is sometimes just jumping to something isn't always the best without properly evaluating the risks. So
yeah. No, for sure. Be interested to hear if anybody has any suggestions around some additional training that you'd like to see. I mean, I went through quite a bit of offerings that we have planned, but anything additional anybody would like to see from us?
not seeing too much in the chat right now, so we're doing a good job then. We're getting some stuff.
I know it's quite a bit, right? So, like Justin mentioned earlier, I mean, if you are a Microsoft Teams shop, that technology is evolving constantly, and I was just talking with my training staff today around having like almost weekly training updates, because Microsoft just keeps adding functionality every single day, and so it'd be good to just just make people actually just aware that this functionality has come out, right? So yeah, so maybe we covered quite a bit of it. So
Actually, I did actually get a question from Parveen. It's about the BC government does dispose of Planetronix UC headsets when staff change. They could be reused if we were to buy new ear pads. So that's good to know. And do you know if there's any way that a housing provider community could get a hold of these? I'm not sure if you link to Shared Services BC or if you do all your own tech.
A lot of times what we do is, yes, there's a lot of surplus BC government equipment, and sometimes when we're short on donation equipment. So sometimes what we do is we'll have PCs, but a society would like a monitor with the PC. Sometimes we'll go on to the BC auction website and bid with everybody else, and get a bunch of monitors for like $10 a monitor or something like that, just to try to provide that complete package to people. So I haven't really looked for headsets on there before, but if that's of interest, we could look into that. I mean, we have headsets too that sort of go through the life cycle too. So I could try to also try to start putting some of that aside, because I know when we went full-blown teleworking back in mid-March, it was difficult to find headsets. Like I know I was running around the computer stores trying to get headsets, because all of a sudden we had a remote call center, which we'd never had before. People wanted to do Teams calls, so they wanted headsets provided. So there was a lot of running around. Vanessa can attest to that, who works with me. She had to find quite a few headsets for us. So I see there's a chat question, Justin.
Yeah, so actually Parveen got back about that. So they indicated that they do not consider it hygienic, but you can buy earpads directly from Planetronix just for the headsets themselves. So that's good to know.
Yeah, okay, that's cool.
Okay. Yeah, there's another link here. So Graham Wood, it's on the HP Tech BC resources page. So there's an IT manager job description. Could you provide input for a rate of pay for a position like this? I imagine it's not cheap, but necessary.
That's interesting, because I've just been helping a couple societies hire an IT manager quite recently. So it depends on what you want out of this person. So if you're looking for an IT manager who's basically just keeping the lights on and is not offering really anything on the strategic side, then you're looking at like I don't know, maybe a 70 to 80 grand a year type person. But if you want somebody who's at that next level, who can actually provide an IT strategic plan or do some long-term planning with infrastructure, then you're looking at 90 to 100K for someone like that. But you got to remember, that's not going to be someone who has 20 years experience or anything like that. That's probably going to be someone who's more on the junior to intermediate side. Hopefully that answers your question. Okay.
Thumbs up emoji, yes. And there's no emoji support for this yet. I'm sure they'll be adding that in the next update when
Teams has that.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the thing. Teams seems to be adding more stuff more frequently, so that's good to know. Yeah, but a very good point about training. Yep.
Mike, there's been some chat just to that point about some, and you kind of touched upon it, some of our providers sharing resources on the IT side, whether it's a dedicated FTE or consultancy services. Where do you sort of stand on that piece, would you say?
What I'm starting to see now is I haven't seen too much sharing of internal resources, because usually the internal resources are already working at about 100%, if not more. So I have not seen much of that going on. What I am seeing is a shift from third parties back to internal staff. And the reason for that is that I mean, we've been called in many times over the last, even just the last year, where there's performance issues with third-party providers. And a lot of the issues around that is that you have sort of the nonprofit philosophy versus the for-profit philosophy. And sometimes they don't really mesh too well. Because a third-party service provider, they've got, you know, they might have 10, 30, 50 customers who they're all working with all at the same time. And so sometimes having your own people is not a bad thing to do, because they're always looking out for your best interests and not having to deal with this multitude of requests coming in. So I'm not saying one is necessarily better than the other. It's just that's sort of a shift I'm starting to see now. But of course, it's all depends on the available budget. And sometimes, you know, some organizations are paying probably quite a bit of money for their third party, and they actually are saving money by hiring their own people. So, you know, give and take, right?
So include that in sort of your strategic planning and kind of budgetary discussions earlier on, it sounds like.
That's right, exactly. Yeah.
I see a hand raised from Troy here. Feel free to unmute yourself.
I was just going to say that I kind of have been doing on-the-job training as an administrator in Office 365. So I'm like the finance director, but IT's kind of fallen in my lap. So just a high-level day-to-day, it's not that difficult. I even learned to create SharePoint sites and do all of that. And then what we do is we keep an IT consultancy on like on retainer for the really difficult stuff that I just either don't have time to do or I just can't figure out. But honestly, just creating email addresses and setting things up and do it, it's not difficult at all. It's pretty intuitive.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I recommend the move to Office 365, because it is a very simple environment to administer. I think, Troy, in your case, you're able to reduce your IT costs quite significantly by going down that path. Is that right?
Yeah, we were paying close to $100 per workstation per month in server support and everything else, and really it was just keeping it going and getting new email addresses out. And then we're down to with TechSoup, the Office 365 accounts $5 per person per month. And then you know, if you just throw and all of our IT costs have just been going into creating the infrastructure, not really maintaining it. So now that we're almost at the place we want to be, our costs are pretty low.
Yeah.
Although, Troy, I think when you said it's not that difficult on the IT part, Mike's eyes did go on the back, like curled back to his head a little bit.
Yeah.
The high level aspect of it, the high level.
I don't IT people anymore, right?
Exactly. No, it's a very good point. Some things can be very easy to set up, which is very great. One thing, just a word of warning, is setting them up is all very easy. Sometimes it is good to get kind of an overall plan in place first before, you know, a year from now when you have 30 pages, you have to try and figure out how everything works. And it's just, it is good to have a bit of a plan. And maybe that's probably what you're already doing with the consultants, is following up them first, finding out, you know, getting an idea of what, you know, path you should take.
Oh yeah, we worked with them directly to get our idea and help implement it. It's just right now, I'm saying maintaining. We bring on a new person, we do it. If I have to create a new group, I can do that. All of those kinds of things, the day-to-day stuff that I've now figured out how to do. But yeah, definitely you'll need someone to support you.
Yeah, that's great. Great. We're coming up on time here. Were there any more questions in the chat, Justin, or any hands raised?
I'm not seeing too much else. I know, just want to thank the BC Housing does have their site. We also have resources on our BCMPHA website, bcmpha.ca. We'll have a link in the chat in a second. We also have a housing job match website, which is trying to help people right now kind of match with the job seekers with people looking for work. And we're going to be updating that fairly soon with a whole new portal to make it a lot easier and more intuitive. So keep that in mind.
Great. Thanks, Justin. Yeah. Want to thank everybody for their time today. I know everybody's extremely busy, and hopefully you found this valuable. like I said, if you know, I'm more than happy to stay on the line if more people want to have some discussions, or you had my contact information earlier on the previous slide, so feel free to reach out to me at any time. What we're going to do is we're going to be putting all this together, putting the ideas together. We'll review the questions that came in and see what didn't get answered, and we'll provide some additional answers there. I think that pretty well wraps it up. Maybe I'll just turn it back over to Dean if he's got any last words to say.
Yeah, no, that was really fantastic, Mike, and thanks again to all the providers who joined us, and thanks to Justin and Tanya and Vanessa as well. And I'm sure we'll have more of these in the future. Unfortunately, the pandemic, you know, there's talk about a second wave in the fall, and so this is definitely going to continue being on the radar for all of us. So thanks again, Mike, for sharing this.
Yeah, for sure. Anytime. Great. Well, thank you very much, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye-bye, everyone. I know this recording will be on the member forum if you do want to go back to it.
Great. Thanks.